A three-star military general of one of the world's most brutal regimes. Watch this. The president extends his hand, to which the North Korean general responds with a salute. Mr. Trump, in turn, salutes right back and then shakes the general's hand. This video was featured and has been featured on North Korean state TV today. Now the White House says the president was briefed on appropriate protocol, which is to not salute military officers from other countries, but they are not viewing this necessarily as a mistake. They say it's about showing respect to Kim Jong-un and his entourage, including his general. Let's discuss this and more with my next two guests. Lindsay Ford is the director of the Political Security Affairs Division over at the Asia Society. It's a policy institute here in Washington, a former senior advisor for the Department of Defense, and CNN military and diplomatic analyst, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby, a former spokesman for the Pentagon and the State Department. Put on your military hat for a moment. Is it appropriate for the President of the United States to salute a foreign general, let alone a foreign general of a regime like North Korea?
No, it's not. I mean, there's a very valid concern is here that he was showing deference and respect to an officer in the military that not only brutalizes their own soldiers, but their own people, and still have a robust nuclear and ballistic missile program capable of destabilizing the region. So no, it was not the right thing to do. It was not appropriate. And then there's the propaganda value. There's no surprise, it should be a surprise to anybody, that North Korean state TV is airing this thing on a constant loop. It's exactly the image and the respect and the legitimacy that Kim Jong-un was trying to see.
So would it, and you're a retired admiral, a rear admiral, would it have been appropriate for the president to salute a British or French general as opposed to a North Korean general?
Yeah, look, I think the rules are there's not strict protocol on this. He's the president of the United States. He can return a salute to anyone he wants, foreign and domestic. It's typically not done that presidents return the salutes of foreign military officers. But yes, it would be a lot less problematic if it was somebody in an allied nation than it would be for an officer in the North Korean military.
Lindsay, there was the president strongly defending his decision to say some nice words about Kim Jong-un at the summit in Singapore. Listen to this. This is what he told Fox News on why he was doing that.
You know, you call people sometimes killers. He is a killer. I mean, he's clearly executing people.
He's a tough guy. Hey, when you take over a country, tough country, with tough people, and you take it over from your father, I don't care who you are, what you are, how much of an advantage you have. If you can do that at 27 years old, I mean, that's 1 in 10,000 that could do that. So he's a very smart guy. He's a great negotiator. But I think we understand each other.
But he's still done some really bad things.
Yeah, but so have a lot of other people done some really bad things. I mean, I could go through a lot of nations where a lot of bad things were done. Now, look, with all of that being said, the answer is yes.
What do you think of that answer?
Yeah, it's a little disturbing to me that, honestly, he's normalizing the behavior of a dictator here. He's talking about Kim Jong-un inheriting the family business as if we're talking about real estate. You know, Kim Jong-un being tough, what that means? It means Otto Warmbier comes home in a coma. It means he's got 100,000 people in gulags. It means rapes, forced abortion, torture, killing. So I think we should be under no illusions what toughness means on Kim Jong-un's part.
His defense, as you know, John, is he's trying to prevent the nuclear war, and if it means negotiating and dealing with Kim Jong-un, you got to do it.
Yeah, look, that's what he'll say, and that's what he'll say about the salute, too. But, Wolf, look, foreign policy can't just be transactional. It does have to be based and rooted in values, in representing who we are as a nation. And when he talks about Kim Jong-un in this way, he demeans the very values that the United States has historically represented on the world stage.
There's a new poll that's out on how the American people feel about this whole summit. Let me put some numbers up on the screen. I'm on with the university poll. If you see the question over there, did Singapore summit make president look stronger or weaker on world stage? Stronger, 46%, only 13% weaker, 38% really didn't change, 4% don't know. What do you think of the results of that?
Well, I think the president would probably be pretty happy to see those results. But, you know, to me, that's not the question we ought to be asking. The question we ought to be asking coming out of this summit was, did this summit make the United States safer? Because that's ultimately what we were concerned about here.
Did this summit make the United States safer?
To me, the jury's still out, but I don't feel terribly confident on the answer to that question.
Did the summit make the United States safer?
Based on just the results that we got, I have to say no, not yet. But again, I think the jury's out. They need to have these negotiations and follow-up process and a framework for getting there. And I think we should all be hopeful that they can. But we gave up an awful lot out of this summit and got very, very little in return.
All right, let's see what happens, because all of us want to avoid that worst-case scenario. Clearly, John Lindsay, thanks so much for joining us. There are new details just moments away coming out. James Comey, the focus of the soon-to-be officially released Inspector General's report at the Department of Justice. Take a closer look back at how it all started, how the FBI director put himself front and center right in this investigation of Hillary Clinton and her email. Stay with us.
It felt great not having hepatitis C. It's like a load off my shoulders. I was just excited.
A very damning or exonerating report from the U.S. Department of Justice. Just moments from now, the Inspector General at the Justice Department is expected to release his findings on how top federal officials handled the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. President Trump has repeatedly accused the FBI of botching the Clinton investigation. In fact, he cited former FBI Director James Comey's handling of the probe as a reason for his firing. As we wait for the official document, we want to remind all of our viewers how we all got to this current situation. Our justice correspondent, Jessica Schneider, is now to take us through the key details in the investigation. Jessica.
Well, Wolf, it's a timeline with a lot of twists and turns. So the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server, that began in July 2015, in the very early days of the 2016 campaign. Of course, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State under President Obama. And in 2015, it emerged that she was using a personal email account. So on July 10th, 2015, the FBI opened that criminal investigation, codename Mid-Year Exam. That's when agents investigated her handling of emails and her handling of classified information. And really, by the summer of 2016, this case had become enormously politically charged, with then-candidate Donald Trump making comments just like this one.
The emails, that's bad judgment. It's also dishonesty. That's why we call her Crooked Hillary Clinton. Frankly, what Hillary has done is criminal, folks. It's criminal.
So after those comments from then-candidate Donald Trump, then came another twist. On June 27th, 2016, it was then Attorney General Loretta Lynch. She was sitting on the same tarmac as former President Bill Clinton. He got word that they were both there, and he boarded her plane at a Phoenix airport. Now, Loretta Lynch has said nothing related to the Hillary Clinton investigation was discussed, but of course, Republicans seized on that meeting as evidence that the investigation was fixed. So in the days that followed, FBI Director James Comey, he told Loretta Lynch that he planned to bypass the Justice Department and hold his own news conference announcing the results of the Clinton email investigation. So there it was on July 5th, 2016, when Comey made this surprise public statement.
Although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
So with that statement, the case seemed to be closed. But then just a few months later, in late September 2016, yes, an even stranger twist. Federal prosecutors began investigating former New York Congressman Anthony Weiner for sexual communications he had with a minor. Of course, Weiner was the husband of top Hillary Clinton aide Huma Abedin. Then, about a month later, on October 28th, 2016, 11 days before the election, James Comey, he wrote a letter to Congress, and he alerted them, announcing that emails investigators found on Weiner's laptop could potentially be relevant to their old case. Hillary Clinton has pointed to this exact announcement as ruining her chances to win the White House. It was several days later, just after that, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, he recused himself because of his wife's relationship with Terry McAuliffe, who was connected to the Clintons. And then, on November 6th, just 2 days before the presidential election, Director James Comey sent a second letter to Congress where he concluded that based on our review, we have not changed our conclusion that we expressed in July. So once again, closing out that Hillary Clinton email investigation. But Clinton's team has said the damage was already done. And of course, Wolf, 2 days later, Donald Trump was elected president. And now here we are awaiting the IG report, which will rehash some of this timeline and draw some conclusions on how this investigation was handled. Wolf?
Yeah, very good report from you, Jessica. Thank you very, very much. Important stuff. Some members of Congress have already seen it. They're going through the document right now. I'll speak with one lawmaker when we come back.
Whether you're supplying technology to a bill.
Champions for Change, a special CNN series all next week.
Right now, we're only moments away from getting the Inspector General's report detailing how the U.S. Justice Department handled the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. Some lawmakers have already seen the report. They've been reading it from a briefing room inside the Capitol. I want to bring in Democratic Congressman Jared Polis of Colorado. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. We have now learned that the report finds then FBI Director James Comey. He did violate FBI norms, protocols, but those actions weren't necessarily politically motivated. Your reaction?
Look, I mean, Inspector General's report, always good for transparency. If this is being used to in any way discredit the very important special counsel investigation, the Mueller investigation, it's really being used for the wrong end. We need to make sure that, of course, every investigation is done right, including the Mueller investigation, and we need to retain its independence.
Well, do you think there could be some negative spillover from the release of this report on the entire Mueller investigation?
I sure hope not. That would be the wrong message, right? We want to make sure every investigation is done right. And frankly, the Hillary Clinton investigation has had more scrutiny than any other investigation. Frankly, I wish my Republican colleagues cared as much about the integrity of the Mueller investigation to make sure that there's no political motivations going on to let any of the president's associates off easy if they violated the law.
Where do you think this whole Mueller investigation is now heading?
Look, what do we have? Over 20 indictments, several plea bargains. Who knows where it will go? But making sure that it retains independent with a true criminal focus is important wherever it leads. Frankly, the very fact that it might involve the President of the United States really involves the fate of the Republic itself and the integrity of the Republic. So it's very important that we don't have any political interference, nor does this Inspector General's report give any reason for anybody to interfere with the Mueller investigation. It's got to maintain its credibility.
What do you make, Congressman, of this report containing new transcripts of text messages between two key FBI officials, one FBI, one Department of Justice, who were having an affair, and in those messages they were very, very critical of then-candidate Donald Trump?
Well, I think, look, FBI agents, law enforcement officials, they're people. They have their own political opinions. They express them in the private sphere. They never expected private emails to be made public. What's important is that people don't let their political beliefs influence their professional work. And I think that's what there will be an accounting for. And it's the same with the Mueller investigation. We need to make sure that people's personal political beliefs, whether they like Trump or don't like Trump, doesn't interfere in any way with whether criminal laws were violated by President Trump or his associates.
Congressman Polis, thanks so much for joining us. We'll have you back soon.
Always a pleasure, Wolf.
The report and a White House briefing only moments away. Stand by.
Ancestry DNA told my dad he comes from the southern coast of Ireland.
Research and called Coventry Direct. I learned that you could sell all or part of a life insurance policy, even a term life policy. Turns out, people have been selling policies.
General is suing President Trump and his three oldest children, alleging, quote, self-dealing and other persistent illegal conduct at the president's charity, the Donald J. Trump Foundation. Among other things, the president is now accused by New York State of treating his nonprofit like his personal checkbook and using the tax-exempt funds to pay off his business creditors, promote his hotels, decorate a Trump golf club, and even stage a multi-million-dollar giveaway at a 2016 presidential campaign event in Iowa just days before the crucial caucuses there. Let's go to CNN's Jean Cazares. She's joining us from New York. So, Jean, walk us through these allegations.
And there are many. This is a 41-page verified petition. The defendants are Donald J. Trump personally, the Donald J. Trump Foundation, Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka Trump. And it alleges that the board of directors of this charitable foundation have not met since 1999, that it is merely a shell to benefit Donald Trump personally and his businesses. It does say, in part, quote, "The petition filed today alleges a pattern of persistent illegal conduct occurring over more than a decade that includes extensive unlawful political coordination with the Trump presidential campaign, repeated and willful self-dealing transactions to benefit Mr. Trump's personal and business interests, and violations of basic legal obligations for nonprofit foundations." And it cites many examples, one being, and you may remember this, the Iowa fundraiser in January of 2016. It was a fundraiser for veterans, and Mr. Trump, presidential candidate at that point, participated in Iowa, collecting those monies in lieu of a Republican presidential debate. Well, they say that the foundation raised the money for veterans organizations, but the verified petition says that it was planned, organized, financed, and directed by the campaign, violation of New York state law and charitable laws. Well, we also now have a response from the Trump Foundation, and it is very strong. It says in part, "This is politics at its very worst. The foundation has donated over $19 million to worthy charitable causes, more than it even received. The president himself or through his companies has contributed more than $8 million. The reason the foundation was able to donate more than it took in is because it had little to no expenses. This is unheard of for a charitable foundation." And Trump, what they are asking the court to do is to close down this foundation. They want it done under the responsibility and observation of the court. And they are saying that Donald Trump should no longer be able to participate in any form or fashion of a charitable foundation for the next 10 years. And his children, who are also, as I said, those co-defendants, they cannot involve themselves with a charitable foundation under New York state law for 1 year.
Yeah, they also want the president to pay $2.8 million and additional penalties as a result of this as well. Gene Cazares, thank you very much. The president indicating he plans to fight this lawsuit. He says in part, and let me quote, "The sleazy New York Democrats and their now disgraced and run out of town AG, Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, are doing everything they can to sue me on a foundation that took in $18,800,000 and gave out charity more money than it took in, $19,200,000. I won't settle this case." New York's Attorney General just tweeted a response, and she also had an interview on CNN. Listen to this.
Mr. Trump has tweeted a response. Here we go. "The sleazy New York Democrats and their now disgraced and run out of town AG Eric Schneiderman are doing everything they can to sue me on a foundation that took in $18.8 million and gave out to charity more money than it took in, 19.2. I won't settle this case." What do you make of that? What's your reaction?
Well, there are several points that are made there. This is not either a sleazy or political action, nor was it brought by Mr. Schneiderman. This is a straightforward case of violation of the laws governing charitable foundations and nonprofit corporations in New York.
So, Attorney General...
That's my response to the...
All right, that's your response. So you're saying it was not brought by Mr. Schneiderman, but the tweet goes on to say, Schneiderman, who ran the Clinton campaign in New York, never had the guts to bring this ridiculous case, which lingered in their office for almost 2 years. Now he resigned his office in disgrace, and his disciples brought it when we would not settle.
We brought this case when we were confident that we had the evidence and the legal arguments to back it up, and it was not. It obviously was not settled. That's usually how cases are brought. There's nothing unusual about that.
Barbara Underwood, the Attorney General of New York State, speaking with CNN's chief international anchor, Christiane Amanpour. All right, let's get back to the panel. Seth Waxman, you're a former federal prosecutor. You've looked through this document. All of us have read the document by now. How strong of a case does New York State have against the president and his children?
Well, it seems very strong, but let's be clear at the outset that there's a difference between a civil case and a criminal case. So at the end of this civil case that the AG has brought, the worst thing that can happen to Mr. Trump and his family is a monetary fine. So no one can go to jail for this lawsuit. On the other hand, as I've understood it, there have been referrals made to the Federal Election Campaign Commission and the IRS when Donald Trump, the president, signed this tax form that's associated with charitable foundations, a 501c3. He signed and said that all the money being brought in was going to be used for charitable purposes. If that is a lie, that is perjury. That can be a federal crime. In addition, if monies are taken from donors under the auspices that it's going to go for some charitable purpose and it's diverted to someone's personal bank account to their personal interest, be it political campaigns, dressing up a golf club or whatever, that can be fraud. And that can be, under the federal law, wire fraud, which is a 20-year criminal penalty in jail at maximum. So for me, what's the most concerning about this, if I'm the president, isn't that someday he might have to pay some monetary fines. I don't know that he much cares about that at the end of the day. My concern, if I'm him and his lawyers, is that there could be a criminal referral to a U.S. attorney's office, and now he's back in the soup of yet another criminal investigation.
Yeah, it's a significant allegation made by the New York State Attorney General, Margaret, that they used this charity for political purposes in the days leading up to the Iowa caucuses, and that they've got text messages here from the then Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski explaining what should be done with this money that's being raised. Charitable foundations are not supposed to be involved in politics.
Yeah, that's right. And I think Seth is certainly right that if this were to take on some sort of a criminal element or aspect on a parallel track, it would obviously be a huge story at that point. But there is a softer impact to this right now that is potentially real also, and that is that it goes to the credibility and the trustworthiness of the Trump organization in general and charitable claims. And don't forget, the president is currently engaged not just in midterm campaigning, but has a re-election campaign that has been up and running for some time. And among some segments of his base or supporters, the ability to trust his word and to know that when he says he's trying to help coal miners, that he's trying to help, recovering, veterans who are home and looking for jobs, all of that matters too. So there's sort of this parallel track of potential impacts, and one deals with the unknown, something we haven't seen yet, is whether there's going to be a criminal aspect. But the other, it just goes to this question of trust and credibility.
And the president, in his tweets a couple times, April, he said, "I won't settle this case." Right. He said the former New York Attorney General Schneiderman, he resigned his office in disgrace, and his disciples brought it when we would not settle. He has settled cases in the past after declaring he won't settle. Trump University case, for example, he repeatedly said he wouldn't settle. He wound up settling.
But there are also a lot of other cases that he hasn't settled out of court. People that worked for him building his buildings or building whatever he's built, and he's tied them up in court forever. But the bottom line is, you don't want to hear a president of the United States saying, I'm not going to settle something that could have wire fraud implications or credibility implications. This is the President of the United States of America. Every American basically has to follow the rule of law, follow the patterns of justice, and settle something. And for him to say, I'm not going to settle, it doesn't bode well. If anything, you would want to kind of work this out. But one thing that really sticks out about this case to me, just like what's happening with Mueller, they're following the trail of money. There are trails of money everywhere that's pointing to the family. And it just screams to me. All of this is about money from a charity that's gone to different places that weren't supposed to happen. And then you have what's happening over here with Mueller. They're pulling records and pulling computers, trying to find out the trail of money, because that all leads to whatever the end case is, if I'm correct.
It's just another legal headache also for the president. The Mueller investigation.
But it's about money.
The Michael Cohen investigation, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. There's a lot of legal stuff going on right now that the President of the United States has to worry about. Guys,
on his birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy
birthday to the President of the United States. Not necessarily a nice birthday present from New York State for the President. All right, we've got a lot more news that's unfolding even as we speak. North Korea releasing some new video.
He held his July 2016 press conference in which he cleared Hillary Clinton of any wrongdoing in the email investigation. But the Inspector General found that he was not acting out of political bias when he did that. That press conference, of course, is one in which he detailed all the things that Hillary Clinton did wrong, in which he said, however, that no reasonable prosecutor would be able to bring charges against her. And of course, John, you remember that President Trump and a lot of Republicans have claimed that the email investigation, the Clinton investigation, was rigged, that it was not done properly, that it was done with political bias. According to the Inspector General, after this 18-month investigation, they found that there is no evidence to show that there was any political bias in the way the investigation was done. Obviously, there's plenty here in this report. There's about 500 pages right now that members of Congress are being briefed on. The President is being briefed personally by Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General. So there's plenty in this report for them for the Republicans and for the President to pick up on, to support the idea that the President was right to fire James Comey. But the top line, the important part of this, is the fact that the Inspector General found that there was no political bias in the way the investigation was done, which is a key accusation that the President and Republicans in Congress have been making, John.
Evan Perez with the breaking news. Appreciate it, Evan. Come back if we get more. Back in the studio now. The question is, will the President accept that? When his Deputy Attorney General says, you had every reason to fire James Comey. He made bad judgment calls here. We can have a separate debate about the President saying it was also about the Russia meddling investigation to Lester Holt. But there was no political motivation, Mr. President. He did not do this. There was no pro-Clinton, anti-Trump bias in James Comey and the FBI, according to this report. Will the President accept that fact?
No, but it's an important fact that we should think about and accept as journalists and people who are viewing this. No, he's not going to accept it. But I think it still matters that he spent, almost a year saying this investigation was wrong and cleared Hillary for no reason. And we've had a report from a pretty serious IG respected by both parties now saying it was not politically motivated. Will it change the politics? No, but it matters. I think.
An important point you just made, and we have to focus on the facts. The same IG who wrote this report, James Comey, made mistakes, made bad judgment calls, should have handled himself better, but was not motivated by politics, is the same guy who wrote the report Republicans loved just a couple of weeks ago that led to Andy McCabe, Comey's former deputy, being fired. The question is, what happens? Rod Rosenstein sitting there. President despises Rod Rosenstein. The President views Rod Rosenstein as part of the problem. He's saying, Mr. President, James Comey was a bad actor. He was not a biased actor.
Well, this is not going to make him like Rod Rosenstein anymore, and I don't think he's going to accept, as Perry says, that this was not politically motivated. He still feels that it is, and he will continue to say that. It is important that we now know an IG, an independent inspector general, has concluded otherwise. But I do think he will seize on all the material in this report that we apparently have that says that, Comey acted wrongly, because he will use that as a defense for firing him and say, this was not obstruction of justice, this wasn't me trying to protect myself, this was an FBI director who was off the rails and I had plenty of reason to fire him, and that too will be an important part of the President's argument.
And will he accept that his current Justice Department team can deal with what the ramifications of the report, the cleanup, if you will, the new standards, or will he accept the calls from Republicans on Capitol Hill to say Jeff Sessions, Rod Rosenstein, Chris Wray, 3 Trump appointees are part of the problem now?
Well, I think we'll find out pretty quickly here. The day started, there was no White House briefing while the President was meeting with they have now scheduled a briefing. I'm sure Sarah will be
asked about
a direct message from the President.
All right, we'll continue our breaking news reporting. Thanks for joining us Inside Politics. Wolf picks up coverage right now.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thanks very much for joining us. We start with breaking news, the imminent public release of the long-anticipated report on the U.S. Department of Justice and its handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Some details are already leaking, like the determination that the then FBI Director James Comey deviated from longstanding protocol, but was not motivated by political bias. Comey is one of the major players in all of this, along with the former Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, Hillary Clinton, of course, and the President of the United States. The major questions are simple. Was proper protocol followed by the then FBI Director? We now know the answer there. Did inside forces in the FBI compromise the Clinton investigation? And was any campaign aided by the inclusion or exclusion of critically important information? Let's bring in our crime and justice reporter Shimon Prokopez and our senior congressional correspondent Manu Raju. He's up on Capitol Hill. Shimon, so what do we know already about the report that's supposed to be publicly released within the hour?
Well, certainly some key findings here by the Inspector General here. So the idea, that the president has been touting this notion that the Clinton investigation was rigged, that there was bias somehow by the FBI in favor of Hillary Clinton, and that they didn't bring charges against her. Well, now we have our answer here from the Inspector General, who's been looking at this now for over a year, Wolf. And he's saying essentially in his report, what we're told is that there was no pro-Clinton bias. There was nothing to indicate that anything that the FBI did in their investigation would give any credibility, anything to the idea that, as the president has said, that this was somehow rigged. We've also learned here that Comey erred, that he made errors here in his decision not to coordinate with superiors at the Justice Department at key moments in the Clinton email investigation. And that relates to, of course, that press conference he held where he announced the decision and the results of the investigation. It also relates to essentially when the FBI, when James Comey decided to reopen the investigation just days before the election in November 2016. We all remember that happened as a result of emails that were found on the Anthony Weiner's laptop, and it was a letter that he had sent to the Hill to lawmakers, essentially saying that a new review was underway. And that certainly was controversial. And now we have the Inspector General here saying that these moments, these key moments in the investigation, it appears that Comey made some mistakes.
Yeah, it certainly does. Manu, I know members of Congress are getting briefed on all of this. What's the reaction so far up on Capitol Hill?
Well, actually, you're hearing people from both sides picking out things that advance their narratives about exactly what happened in 2016. The Democrats say that, in fact, what Comey did in his mishandling of the email investigation actually helped Trump become president. This is a statement from Jerry Nadler and Elijah Cummings, two top Democrats who reviewed the report. They say the stark conclusion that they have come up with after reviewing the report is that the FBI's actions helped Donald Trump become president. Now, Republicans see it differently, including Darrell Issa, a Republican who was in that briefing with the officials from the Inspector General's office. And what he heard was major problems in the way that the Justice Department handled this investigation, the James Comey's handling of this investigation. And other members, too, on the Republican side of the aisle say that there actually need to be further investigations, perhaps by a second special counsel to look into exactly what the FBI did wrong in 2016. Here's Senator Lindsey Graham just earlier today.
If we find systematic abuse at Department of Justice and FBI, then who's going to do something about it? I think you would need some independent eyes. If he suggests that the DOJ and the FBI got off the rails and did inappropriate things when it came to the Clinton email investigation, who's supposed to go figure out what should have happened? And to me, that's got to be somebody out of the Department of Justice, somebody that we all trust. I think Mueller was the right guy. I think he's doing his job in a professional manner. Pick somebody like him.
And, Wolf, the release of this report is only going to intensify this debate going forward. Come Monday, the Senate Judiciary Committee is going to have a hearing about this 500-page report. And invited to that hearing is the former Deputy Director, Andy McCabe, who is addressed in this report. And McCabe himself is facing a separate criminal investigation, and he wants immunity to testify at that hearing. The chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee told me earlier today that he does not expect immunity to be dealt with before Monday, but they're considering a subpoena to issue to compel his appearance, maybe not by Monday, but maybe at a later date. So, Wolf, this is not ending anytime soon. Republicans and Democrats still have a lot of questions, Wolf.
Yeah, they certainly do. All right, Manu, Shimon, guys, stand by. I know you're working your sources, and you'll bring us new information. In the meantime, I want to bring in our panel and Gloria Borger. The Republicans, or at least a lot of the supporters of the president, his top aides, they certainly have been hoping this long-awaited report would give them some ammunition to try to delegitimize, to derail the overall Russia probe that Robert Mueller is leading.
Right, and where you stand depends on where you sit in this investigation. And as Manu said, everybody's going to find something. And the important point here is that Comey behaved misbehaved. He didn't behave according to Justice Department norms. He's severely criticized for it. So the president will say, see, I did the right thing in firing him. That was a good thing to do. I should have fired James Comey. But the Inspector General also did not find any evidence of a conspiracy at the heart of the FBI to hurt Donald Trump. In fact, I think it's just the opposite. And what Donald Trump has always been saying is that because Comey appointed some of these same people who worked with him on the email investigation to the Russia investigation, that there was a conspiracy against him, and the whole Russia investigation is therefore rigged against him. This clearly does not support that point of view. You know, Trump will use it to say Comey's a bad guy, and I think that the
President has often said, Margaret, that someday the American people will all stand up and thank him for firing Comey as the FBI director. Will this report bolster that?
It's hard to see that this report really changes the game. The two sort of sides of how you perceive this seem pretty well set. We know that what the president has been hoping for, wanting for all these months is a recommendation for some sort of a criminal procedure to follow. And given what we've seen of the conclusion so far, it doesn't. There's no evidence that that's going to be the conclusion at all of this process. If you've listened to Comey, either if you've read his book or if you listen to his many kind of public expository discussions about this, he's always sort of indicated that he didn't feel there was a rule book for what was the right thing to do, that he knew that he was maybe stepping outside of the norms and kind of did what he thought was the right thing anyway. I doubt he would be shocked by the findings, but the fact that there is no kind of partisan putting the thumb on the scale, I think, is going to make it difficult for the president to get what he wanted to out of this.
Evan Perez, our justice correspondent, is getting some more information, specifically, Evan, on whether any criminal charges are likely to emerge from this Inspector General's report.
Well, Wolf, I think that's one of the things that the president has been pushing for. Certainly, he's been tweeting about it and saying that he believes people should go to jail for this. Certainly, we have already a criminal referral that has come out of this against Andrew McCabe, who is the former deputy director of the FBI, for lying to investigators. And that's the one that is still being looked at by prosecutors here in Washington. But as far as charges against James Comey or perhaps even against Hillary Clinton, which is what you've heard repeatedly from some Republicans and the president in particular, it doesn't appear from what we're seeing in this report that is going to be coming forward. And so the president is probably going to be disappointed. But as Gloria and I think Margaret have pointed out, I think the president will certainly be able to use some of the findings in this report to support his claim that he was right to fire James Comey, that Rod Rosenstein's memo it was in which he described the reasons why James Comey had lost the confidence of the Justice Department was reason for him to be fired. And so, look, I think there's plenty of stuff here for the president to work with politically. But as far as getting criminal charges against Comey and against other people, I think he's going to be very disappointed when he reads this report.
There are apparently, Evan, and you correct me if I'm wrong, some new transcripts that are being released of text messages between some FBI agents, FBI personnel who were involved in the investigation, which show a pretty negative attitude toward Donald Trump.
Right, exactly. And we're talking about two FBI employees, Pete Strzok and Lisa Page, whose years-long affair and apparent texting that was going on for years was revealed as a result of this investigation. A lot of inappropriate texts were sent, including some which showed some definite political bias against Donald Trump. It appears they didn't like Hillary Clinton very much either, if you read some of these text messages. And certainly, I think there is enough here for the Attorney General and for the FBI to take action against those people. I think the Attorney General just today in an interview said that he expects that there might be some additional disciplinary action that might be forthcoming, and I suppose it's easy to expect that those two people are who he has in mind. But look, I think those text messages notwithstanding, I think the top line from this Inspector General report is that even though you had these inappropriate messages being exchanged by people who were involved in this investigation, it did not affect the ultimate outcome. After all, Wolf, the people who were controlling this investigation were way above these two, and the Inspector General found that there was no political bias in the way the investigation was ultimately conducted.
Good point. April is with us. April Ryan, our CNN political analyst, White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks. Let me play a clip. This is Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General. He's obviously gone through this Inspector General's report. The Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, highly regarded, seen by almost everyone as responsible and credible. Here's how Sessions described what he saw in the report.
I think it'll be a lengthy report and a careful report. It will be released soon. And I think it will help us better fix any problems that we have and reassure the American people that some of the concerns that have been raised are not true.
It's unclear what exactly he's referring to, but he's suggesting that, you know what, he has total confidence in this Inspector General report.
And it almost sounded a little bit like he could have been taking a jab at the president, too, as well. But, you know, it's interesting to hear what he has to say. I think back about the reputation of the FBI over the years, how it had been sullied, and he's trying to fix the reputation of the FBI by this 500-page report. And it's good that it comes from someone that people respect. But at the same time, you have to remember, if what we're hearing about this report is true, what Comey did was not political. It was not political. Was it the right timing? No. And I talked to someone from another administration who was a high-ranking official in the Justice Department who said, and I'm going to give you the word, they said he should have kept his ASS off the podium. And strong words. And that is really, I mean, what did Loretta Lynch have to do with that? What did she play in that, you know, to allow him to do that? That was wrong. And going back to what Margaret said, you know, there was no rule for that, but he should not have done that. And did it help Hillary Clinton? I don't think so. It seemed like it hurt her. Did it help Donald Trump win the presidency? We don't know. But this report is critical, and it's important that Jeff Sessions, who has recused himself from the Russia investigation, take this seriously, because the FBI, once again, is now under a cloud because of this IG report.
You know, and April makes a good point. Seth Waxman is with us, former federal prosecutor. You understand how all this works. The FBI does investigating, but they leave it to the Deputy Attorney General or the Attorney General or a U.S. attorney to say there is enough evidence for criminal charges to be filed or not. He instead did that himself as the FBI director, and that was seen as inappropriate.
Yeah, I mean, typically you have your FBI agents out there doing the field work, making referrals to prosecutors, and then the prosecutors make the decision. So the fact that he went out front and center, you know, without consulting with the Attorney General, without consulting with prosecutors, is outside the norms. And, you know, it strikes at least me as kind of outside the normal scope of what he would typically do. You know, what strikes me also is that the chance of lock her up, you know, that we heard throughout this entire political campaign, this report does not seem to support that kind of finding.
Well, we're going to go through that 500-page report, obviously, throughout the day. Everybody stick around. There's more we need to discuss. There's other breaking news we're following. New York State suing the President of the United States and his children, alleging they illegally used money from their charity for the political campaign. How serious is their legal trouble right now? Plus, North Korea releasing video of President Trump saluting one of Kim Jong-un's generals. We'll discuss that and more. Stay with us.